military that has, and I've seen it for over 2 years.
Everybody, thanks for joining us today for the Medicare for All Forum. Can you all just come a little bit closer? You don't have to sit necessarily in person, but just come closer. So I did talk with Representative Darren Madison. He is on his way, so we might have to wait a little bit to get started. But we'll still get started regardless. But again, thank you all for being here. As you know, I talked with many of you. The reason why we wanted to have this forum is because since the election or the end of Bernie Sanders' last 2020 campaign, there's been little to no action when it comes to Medicare for all. In fact, President Joe Biden said if it came to his desk, he would veto it. And we think that's acceptable in a nation that has, the only industrialized nation that does not guarantee health care for all its citizens. So one of the things I want to start with is I want to thank the organizations supporting this forum. So Milwaukee DSA, thank you guys for being here. Wisconsin Citizen Action, PNHP, Wisconsin Poor People's Campaign, Voces de la Frontera, and also United Electric. Having the support of different organizations and diverse organizations is what's going to make this movement continue, regardless of who's in office. Okay, gotcha. Regardless of who's in office. So first things first, I want to kind of introduce the organizations that are supporting us. So the first person I'm going to introduce, and just walk back in, is Brandon Williford. He's the one of the healthcare organizers for Wisconsin Citizen Action. So he's just going to tell you a little bit about why they're here and why they're supporting Medicare for all.
Appreciate that, Andre. So again, my name is Brandon Williford. I'm the healthcare organizer for Citizen Action Wisconsin. Yeah, I'd just like to talk about, why we're here. So first and foremost, Citizen Action Wisconsin, we always been an advocate for a single payer system for Medicare for all, and we actually been one of the longest Medicare for all advocacy groups in the state. We believe that it's important to explain the role of private insurance in the effect of Medicare for all. So we know that people tend to sign up for Medicare for all, when they hear about it, and they think it's a good thing. But this feeling kind of gets reversed when they hear about something getting taken away, and that thing usually being private insurance. So with this in mind, we really want to engage folks who may have experienced claim denials or who just hate private insurance altogether, and really bring them together from the community and let them know hey, this is a bad thing, and really toxify the image of private insurance because everyone is bad. So with that in mind, if you know anyone or if you yourself have been experiencing these things, I would love to talk to you. Yeah, thank you.
The next organizer that I would like to introduce is a longtime friend and a longtime organizer with Milwaukee DSA. They're huge supporters of Medicare for all. They've done a lot of work in the city of Milwaukee. And Alex Brown.
Thank you all so much. Don't let my sagging afternoon attire diminish the seriousness of what we're all here for, right? As I stand up in front of you guys, it's so good to be here. I actually just wanted to let's all just take a sec here to give a round of applause to all the groups that are backing our Wisconsin Revolution and coming out here today and Milwaukee DSA, which I'm representing here today, we're all on board and united in this campaign to bring Medicare for all to this entire country. Because, first of all, it's just the right thing to do. Brandon was given some of the facts, and I just want to double down on what Brandon was saying. If you have stories, share it with Citizen Action. I mean, I worked with Claire before in my professional capacity, and they're doing a great job. So I just want to encourage everybody, if you have a health insurance story, to share it with the folks at Citizen Action so they can get broadcast out there. That's really good. They're doing a great job at that. And what we're all about in the Democratic Socialists of America is really removing the profit motive from this world. Right? The profit motive has been at the root of so many problems in this country. And it's really just, it's about time that it be done, and especially when it comes to healthcare. Why should anybody be profiting off of people just being taken care of? Why is that even a thing in this world, right? Really, we have to be asking that question, and that's going to get at the heart of like all of the problems that this country, the resource destruction, human exploitation, all of these things are at the root of it is being driven by the profit motive and the very existence of Wall Street. So we're advocating for there to be no more Wall Street, no more profit motive, and a lot of the things that really matter to people, right? And when we've gotten the profit motive out of healthcare and out of our utilities, let's get out of other basic necessities too, like food and housing. And as soon as we remove the profit motive from all of those industries, we're going to have a society that actually takes care of each other and actually supports, what we're really should be all about, right? People, humanity didn't start by some person coming out of a cave and saying, I'm going to be an individualist, so I'm going to go kill a mastodon by myself. Said no cave person ever, right? They worked in concert together. The first fire couldn't have been made without people working together. And that's collectivism. And so from the socialist perspective, we're advocating, we built the fire together first, so we're advocating for that spirit to continue of collectivism and of working together without exploiting each other. And that's how we can all, have the discoveries and moving forward as a society. Capitalism has given us so much. We wouldn't have cell phones, we wouldn't have airfare, we wouldn't have, maybe some of these things are blessings or not, we wouldn't have Netflix without capitalism, right? But we can have nice things too, even more nice things, like healthcare for everybody, like taking care of each other, like even more forms of entertainment, even more forms of leisure, even more time for leisure, if we just get rid of the profit motive. So let's start with healthcare. So thank you, Andre. Let's give our Wisconsin Revolution a round of applause.
Thank you for that. That was great. A lot of people don't kind of talk about the incentives of having a democratic socialist society. So we already have parts of that already. And if you didn't know, just basic car insurance is socialism. So we are living it. The next person I would like to introduce is going to be a part of our panel soon. But Tim Shaw. So Tim Shaw, he has a very, very long.
Don't read it.
Oh yeah, that's a very long biography, but what I'll tell you is that he's a physician and he's a strong supporter of Medicare for all and single-payer health care. And we need more physicians like Tim. And he's been great in working with our Wisconsin Revolution and other groups to continue this movement despite of who's in office. So Tim Shaw.
It's been invented by a capitalist. You got my blood pressure up, but that's good. I'm Tim Shaw. Briefly, I'm an otolaryngologist, head and neck surgeon, so my mother didn't know what I went into, but I told her it's an ear, nose, and throat doctor. I trained at UW. I was in the Army many years as a battalion flight surgeon and as a otolaryngologist. And right now I'm retired from otolaryngology, but I'm active in PNHP Wisconsin. I'm one of the co-chairs, me and Nikki Marakis. And in the state of Wisconsin, we have probably 90 to 120, depending on how busy everyone is, activists. And nationwide, we have 20 to 23,000 physicians that are for a Medicare for all type system. We believe healthcare is a human right. And just talking about socialism versus capitalism, you also wouldn't have, if you didn't have socialism, you think of all the things that we as Americans and doctors and health institutions make money at. We're invented in socialized medicine countries, the CT scanner, Britain, blood transfusion, Austria, laparoscopic cholecystectomy, Germany, virtually every operation, Germany, ultrasound, Japan, insulin, Canada, heart surgery, South Africa, tissue typing to make transplants, Belgium, on and on and on. We did invent penicillin, and we did invent Fleming, and we did invent employer-based health insurance and inequitable health insurance. So there's a lot of, I mean, when the lone wolf leaves the pack, their mortality goes up 40%. So we all, like you say, Andre says, socialism is important. I became involved in PNHP, just two little things. PNHP, after getting off 12.5 years of active duty, I went to a hospital, which is a competitive hospital of ours. We shared call at times, but the ophthalmologist asked me to come there to put tubes in a kid's ear with Stickler syndrome. That's cleft palate, cleft lip. They have Coke bottle glasses, and they tend to get retinal detachments. The ophthalmologist didn't have privileges at my hospital. I had privileges at theirs, so he asked me to come to their hospital. So no sooner did I go there than the one of the board members of the hospital comes up with the medical chart and points to the kid's insurance and says, Tim, if all you're going to do is bring this four-letter word into here, you don't need to come here. So we had words, and it wasn't pretty, but I stayed there, and this was like 2 months after getting off active duty when we even took care of prisoners of war under Geneva Convention. You treat people humanely. You just don't treat people. This is a 3-year-old kid with Stickler syndrome. This guy's an anesthesiologist on the board of a big hospital, making 7 figures, and it just ticked me off. I started reading about more fairness in healthcare, and I wound up here. So the other experience briefly is one day I went into a playroom where a bunch of Canadian mother was in there with her 3 little kids, and so out of interest, this was several years ago, I just asked her, I said, how do you like your healthcare system in Canada, knowing that they went to Medicare for all a while back? And she just bit her lip and shook her head and looked me in the eye and said, we cherish our healthcare system. We cherish it. She said, we would never give up what we have to get what you have. We cherish it. So, I'll end there.
Oh, yeah. And he has a couple that come from Canada, and they come to see him every year because they say they can't get the tests. And I'm like, yeah, but there's more complication in that. But he says, I would never want to go Medicare for all because these people say they can't get the test.
Well, that's one person.
I know, that's why I'm saying I would really like to be able to
You interview about
discuss it.
9 out of 10 Canadians, they're for Medicare for all.
Right.
They would never
Right.
give up. And then they say there's waiting lines. I'll just add this.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to.
No.
I would love to talk to him about it a little
I had a
bit.
book I showed in the parking lot to one of my friends. He's an orthopedic surgeon, and he said, I'd never be for that. It was somewhat of a Medicare for all. And he said, I'd never, there are people that have to wait too long. And so like a year later, we were changing in the doctor's changing room, and I went up to him. He looked like he was busy, and I went up to him, said, Ken, you look like you're busy today. He said, I'm very busy. I said, what's your waiting time for hip replacement? He goes, my waiting time is more than 6 months. So I said to him, maybe it would be better if people just went to Canada.
Yeah, that wait time thing never really made sense to me. I call my doctor, which is my established doctor, and I have to wait 2 months for a checkup. Wait times, they're everywhere. It's just about how you wait. The next person I want to bring up is the county executive of Allegheny County. The dude is a firebrand when he was running for Senate. He was one of the only people who would stand up and call out the BS of the Democratic Party, and also vociferously advocate for Medicare for all, and tell everybody why it's better than our current bullshit system. Sorry for my language. But Tom Nelson.
All right. Thank you, Andre. Appreciate, as well as our revolution, putting this together. For me, I'll speak for as a county executive. And Medicare for all, and there's a lot of reasons why we should support and why we should advocate for this system. And not just because this is what every other country, either universal health care or single payer. I think ultimately the way to go would be is to be single payer. I think eventually that is going to be the answer, because that's been the answer everywhere else. And I think this system could be absolutely transformative for local government. Our employees, about 70% of the overall county budget are salaries. And of that 70%, about 20% is benefits, primarily health care. So being able to have and to be able to compensate a good staff, and how much that costs us in general, having a system that would address this and make sure that health care is available for all employees, whether it's private sector or public sector or nonprofit, would be absolutely transformative. And so every dollar that we would save, we could put back into the community, whether it's investment in healthcare, investment in transportation, investment in economic development. But if you look at how this could be absolutely transformed, not just for county workforce, but also the entire community, making the entire community healthy. Our largest department, far and away, and that constitutes about 40% of our budget, is Health and Human Services. And most of the cases and most of the folks who are coming to the courthouse for those services is because they don't have access to everything. The largest division that I have is the AODA, which is alcohol, drug, as well as mental health. So all that in Ottawa County, that's all under one roof. And I went to speak to that division, and the conference room was about twice the size of this room. It was filled. That's how many staff that we have out there who are dealing with this kind of illness, and the reason why they are there in the first place. Most of them either don't have health insurance, or the ones that do have health insurance do not have access to the preventative care and access to the support and the medicine they could use, but they don't have it, so they come to the county. And that has enormous pressure. So what you're seeing is you're seeing the private sector healthcare saying, we're not going to insure you, or we'll insure you, but we're going to charge you an arm and a leg. And so we are, either as taxpayers or county government, we are subsidizing the care that they refuse to offer them in the first place. And that's something that affects all of us. It costs all of us. If we had single payer health care, think of how many problems that we would eliminate. Think of that. When you have not 10%, not 20%, but dollar for dollar, care for care, 40% of the county outlay is addressing a concern, is addressing a real public concern. It's not a private issue. Healthcare is not a private good. Healthcare is a public good because it redounds the benefit of that individual, their family, and their community. I'll end with this. I was a local participant or local leader participant on this workshop for a local healthcare system, a private healthcare system. And so they were doing some different things that they wanted to become more efficient, or they wanted to offer better service and so forth. And they were going back, and it was just hammering away at private health insurance. So they're the reason why the costs are going up. They're the reason why we can't afford this and that and this and that. So I finally said to this executive, well, if the absolute worst answer to this, or the number one cause of the concerns and driving problems in healthcare are private health insurance companies, it would seem to me that the ultimate solution, the best solution, would be a single payer healthcare system. You know what he said? Yeah, I guess that makes sense.
anybody can do is pass Medicare for all, because it actually saves people money. So the fact that we don't have it just means that we have a hypocritical society. They always talk about saving money, being fiscally conservative, but literally the most progressive thing and the most fiscally conservative thing would be Medicare for all. I just noticed I didn't even introduce myself. I'm so busy trying to introduce y'all. I was like, oh, I forgot about my own name. My name is Andre Walton. I'm the Executive Director of Our Wisconsin Revolution. Our Wisconsin Revolution is a social and economic justice organization that is fighting for a better society and make government for and by the people. We're a small organization, but we're very passionate. We love working on issues like Medicare for all, things that are going to help working class people. So that's a little bit about me. That's a little bit about Our Wisconsin Revolution. Is that Adrian? Yes. Adrian, I'll get you in here too, but I was going to do my statement, but I do want Adrian to introduce himself. He's coming to speak for the Poor People's Campaign. But yeah, that's a little bit about Our Wisconsin Revolution. But one of the things that I want to emphasize about this whole movement is that it's not going to take one organization. Our Wisconsin Revolution can't do this by itself, and that's why I did connect with all the organizations we connected with, because it's going to take a whole lot of groups. The way the Civil Rights passed back in the 1960s, it wasn't just one organization, it wasn't just one Luther King, it was a lot of different organizations, and a lot of different people coming together on a shared issue. And that's what we got to do today. But Adrian, I know you just walked in, I'm putting you on the spot. But yeah, I want to introduce Adrian. He's with the Wisconsin Poor People's Campaign. They fought really hard for increasing the benefits for Medicaid and other healthcare initiatives. So Adrian, feel free to kind of tell them a little about yourself and Wisconsin Poor People's Campaign.
How's everybody doing today?
Good.
All right. So my name is Adrian Gibbs. I'm a volunteer with Wisconsin Poor People Campaign, and I'm kind of thrown on the spot, but we do got something written here. One of our fundamental principles as a Poor People's Campaign, the call for moral revival, says we believe that people should not live or die for poverty in the richest nation ever to exist. Blaming the poor and claiming that the United States does not have an abundance of resources to overcome poverty are false narratives used to perpetuate economic exploitation, exclusion, and deep inequality. The Wisconsin Poor People's Campaign is standing with others in the fight for Medicare for all, because we have blamed the poor, and we should be blaming a country that we love for going against its basic principles. Equal protection under law is non-negotiable. Yep, that's right. It will take the most to bring the change we need, and no time to be silent. We have more than enough for all of us. Between 2020 and 2022, billionaires' wealth grew by 1.5 trillion, more than $2 billion a day. Right. During those pandemic years, high greed brought about high amounts of debt. Universal health care could have saved 300,000 lives. If we did enact Medicare for all, we could have a country that would save $450 billion in healthcare costs and 68,000 lives a year. In a state that is violent on the poor, refusing Medicaid expansion every year, refusing mothers access to public care after childbirth, and cutting off health care for hundreds of thousands of people. You and I together must stand consistent on the fight for health. Wisconsin Poor People's Campaign has been highlighting our stories on the issues of accessing health care. We will stay in the fight, so should you. We must fight the poverty, you must fight poverty and not fight the poor. Thank you.
Another person who I would like to introduce is one of our state senators. He's a great progressive. He does a lot of progressive work in the state senate, and regardless of the mass gerrymander we have in the Senate, we all know how I'm just gonna say, fascist that legislator is, and he's fighting back against that. If we didn't have voices like Senator Chris Larson, I'll be very scared about what could be going on in our state legislature. So, Chris Larson, please come up and.
Thank you. Oh, thank you. Yeah, this is the, I didn't take a shower today. I picked up my kids from camp hat. So thank you, I appreciate that. Just don't tell anybody this way. Thank you for putting this together today. It is, with so much going on right now in our state and our country, I mean, it's you know, I don't know about you, but I get like doom scroll syndrome, where you're like just going through Twitter and finding all kinds of bad news, right? Today, here we are, 1 year anniversary from the Dobbs decision, which has huge implications for healthcare. And then, of course, right now we're at the precipice of passing the state budget, which is going to have a huge tax cut for the rich. This just came out less than 48 hours ago, where the vast majority of the tax cut that's going to be benefiting people in the state is going to go to the richest. $4.4 billion tax cut. For most of the people who are, if your average income is around $50,000, you're going to get $32 on average. For those who are making over $350,000 a year, raise your hands. Okay, exactly. I see Representative Jared Madison, who I know is not in that bracket, but raising $82,000 is what your average tax cut is going to be for that. So just kind of giving an idea of what that means. And if it was just a tax policy, that'd be one thing. But the reality is the things that are left on the table, the things that we're not doing in terms of healthcare. We are one of the last 11 states not to pass the Medicaid expansion, not to pass Badger Care. This is a moral dilemma that, frankly, the only people who are failing are the people who are in charge of our state. Just about every other state has figured this out, right? Red states like Montana have moved forward with this. Blue states, of course, went forward with this. But even purple states, right, where there's a mix of Democrats and Republicans in charge. But for us, we're not just the last 11 states. We are the only state in the entire country that is actually paying more to cover less people. Let that sink in. Let that sink in for a second, right? The reality is we're spending more because of the way that this is set up, because Scott Walker had such a gripe with President Obama at the time, that he said, yeah, we're actually going to pay more to cover less people, and we're still continuing that system. And it leaves money on the table. It costs the state money that we could spend to further help people with health care. So all of that's going on, and it's in an environment, right, where we literally are having trouble breathing. I've had asthma since I was 6 years old, right? And a lot of people don't know that. If you know me at all, you know that I run marathons. I run a lot of marathons. I just did a half Ironman last weekend. But it was extremely difficult because I literally can't go outside without struggling breathing. That if you're checking your weather, it says, just be careful, be inside as much as possible. For so many people, that's not an option. Just stay inside all day. And that affects so many people's health. And I feel like if we had a system where everyone was covered, where healthcare was the priority of everyone in the public, that would be something that we would stand up and say, hey, wait a second, we should have breathable air, right? We should make sure that not 1 in 10 kids is coming up with asthma, or in the Black community in Wisconsin, 1 in 8, right, is coming up with asthma. We would stand up and say that's not right. But instead, we live in this system where I remember growing up. And as soon as I got off my parents' health insurance, I realized how health care actually worked. And I say health care, but it's for lack of a better term. Where just calling to get a prescription was, they're saying, oh, you have something called a pre-existing condition. So that means we will not cover that portion under health care, right? This is the pre-Obamacare Wisconsin. And so to get just one inhaler, I needed 3 prescriptions at the time. This was when I was like 20 years old, right? I needed to get an inhaler, I needed to get a pill, I needed to get a 2-day disc. And to have all of those things was $500 a month. At the time, minimum wage was $5.15 a month, right? And so trying to be able to figure that out, Because like, just remember talking to the agent on the other line, like how am I supposed to like be healthy and have health insurance? What does that make, how does that make any sense to have any health insurance? I am otherwise healthy unless I don't have my medicine. And they were like, sorry, you know, that's the way the system is set up. And so I had to do what so many of our neighbors have had to do, which is cut pills in half, to skip doses, or to just not take your medicine at all, right? Raise your hand if you have gone through that, or you have somebody that you know who has gone through that. The reality is, for those of you that don't have your hands up, talk to your friends, talk to your neighbors, talk to anybody who has to use insulin regularly and has had to deal with the price gouging that's happened in the last 5 years, because they are going through it, but it's not something we proudly wear in front of us. We view it, unfortunately, as an individualized fault, right? It's like, oh gosh, you know, it's my fault for being sick, you know, and it is not how the system should be. That is not how it should be at all. You know, do you think, I'll ask the question, do you think that healthcare should just be those who can have the money to pay for it? No. Do you think that prescriptions, that anyone in our country should have to cut their prescriptions in half? No. Do you think anybody in our country should have to skip going to a doctor because they're worried about the other ailments that they might find when they go see that doctor? No. Do you think that we should have a system where your worthiness to have health care is determined by whether or not you have a job? No. Do you think that we should live in a system where we are the only ones in the entire world where we restrict and say that you have a lifetime cap of how much you can get? No. Right. So do you think that we should have a system where every one of our neighbors is deemed worthy of getting health care?
Yes.
No.
Do you think we should live in a system where everybody has access to a doctor regardless of what their socioeconomic background is?
Yes.
Do you think we should have a system where you have to
Just say Medicare for all.
You have to prove. I'm getting there. Don't look at the benefit. Do you think we should live in a system where you have to go to, when you go to a doctor, they stop you to check your wallet to see what insurance you have before they decide what care you get? Right. Like that's not where we should be as a country. And I think like every single time we see hospitals consolidating and continuing to charge more and continuing to refuse to see patients and extending that wait time, that's up to us. That's up to people like Andre. That's up to people like those in this room and our Wisconsin Revolution to show up and say, we can do better than this. We deserve better than this. And to point out the systems that actually work in every other country on the planet. And if we're not doing that, I think that there's just this tendency to get washed up with everything else that's going wrong in the world and not realize the solution is right there. The solution is right there. There's a study that just came out the last week that shows if we went to a Medicare for all system, our country would save billions. Billions, right? And right now this just does not make sense the way that it is. I, for one, recognize, right? It's like when you know something is just not right? It's just kind of tilted. You have to correct it, right? Some people have that if you have like a picture frame in your house that's kind of off. You just can't do anything until that's corrected, right? Or like you're walking with a shoe untied. Like you can't move forward if your shoe is untied. Right now, America is kind of stumbling forward, lopsided with its shoe untied, because we have this broken healthcare system. But it's fixable. It is fixable. And this should be part of everybody who's running for office, whether you're running for a local county board seat, whether you're running for state assembly, whether you're running for county executive, whether you're running for Congress, whether you're running for a higher office. Every single person, this affects, right? And so this should be part of what is ingrained to be a progressive in the United States of America, so that we can continue to push for this, we can continue to make this happen, so that the kids who are growing up in this system will be able to say, yeah, when I was a kid, this is what the system used to be like. And we will never, ever go back to to a situation where you only get health care if you have a job, or your parents have a job, or you're extremely in poverty. But actually going to a system, to a system where everyone gets the health care that they deserve. I believe there's a name for that, Andre.
Yeah, it's like Medicare for all.
Medicare for all? Who's here for Medicare for all? If you haven't called your assembly rep and your senator about the budget, you know, and you're driving to your next destination, make a quick call and let them know.
Definitely so. Yeah, thank you, Chris. And I just want to thank the elected officials who are supporting this forum. So Representative Barry Madison, Senator Chris Larson, County Executive Tom Nelson, Representative Ryan Clancy wasn't able to make it, but he is endorsing our forum. And what that tells me is when it comes down to it, they're going to stand with the people and not just those with money and power. And we need more representatives like that. So when you find senators and representatives who are going to stand with the people, we have to support them. We have to send them money. We have to donate. We have to knock doors for them because they're a dime a dozen. You see what's in DC, you see what's in Madison, it's full of corruption. So thank you guys for being here. I did send an invitation to Representative Moore and the entire Wisconsin or Milwaukee legislator, but those are the ones who attended. So I'm going to give a few brief statements, then we'll get into a discussion panel. But from a show of hands, who think murder is bad? Okay, all of you. So you're actually reasonable people. So most people think murder is bad, but then I have to ask the question, if everyone thinks murder is bad, then why do we allow 30,000 people to die each year from an unjust system? I'm not talking about murder with a gun or murder with a knife, but murder by a system we call capitalism. In the entirety of the Vietnam War, 58,000 U.S. soldiers were killed in combat. That war lasted for 8 years. People saw that human lives were being wasted for an unjust war, and they protested against it. Today in the United States, 30,000 Americans die each year due to lack of health insurance. Over an 8-year span, that is over 240,000 unnecessary deaths. Outside of a handful of activists, there is no mass mobilization like that of the Vietnam War. As a society, how do we decide what is an acceptable death and what is not? Unfortunately, if you live in America, what determines if your death is acceptable is the amount of money in your bank account. While I could go on and on about the numbers, I want to talk to you about how our moral, unjust system affects real people. So I want to tell you a story about Donald Sevestano. Donald was a hardworking, self-employed carpenter. Like many hardworking Americans, Donald did not go to his annual checkups because he did not have health insurance. But something special happened to Donald that would change his life. Donald hit the lottery. With his newfound wealth, Donald decided to take a visit to the doctor for a checkup that he's been putting off for years. Unfortunately for Donald, his newfound wealth came with devastating news. Donald was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. A few weeks later, Donald died. One has to ask, what would have happened to him had we had Medicare for all? Or if he had health insurance, he didn't have to worry about the cost of insurance. I sincerely wish this was a one-off story, but unfortunately, there are thousands of stories just like Donald's, where people are more afraid of the cost of insurance than they are of death. What does this say about a society? One of the things that Chris Larson said that I have to disagree with is, he said our healthcare system is broken. I would disagree with that. I would say it's not broken, but it's working just as designed. It's designed to make money off of our suffering. There are some things that shouldn't have a profit motive attached to it, like the access to clean water, accessible energy, and healthcare. Once you put a profit motive to essential basic human needs, it alters the lives of working people, and we can no longer stand for it. We may have energy behind this fight today, but this is not a new fight. All the way back during the FDR administration, there has been talk about transitioning to a single-payer healthcare system. But every time the movement for change begins, the health insurance swoops in and stops any and all progress. But we're here today to say that's enough. Enough is enough. We will no longer allow them to profit off our suffering. We will no longer depend on GoFundMe to pay for essential services. We will rise above the powerful forces and finally accomplish what every industrialized nation has, and that's guaranteed health care as a right. I'll leave you with one quote that sums up our current healthcare system. Of all forms forms of inequality. Injustice and health is the most shocking in anything. Dr. King said that in the 1960s, and that quote still holds true today. And we're here to fix that. So I want to bring up our panel. So Connie, Alicia, and Darren, you guys come up, take seats. So first and foremost, give them a round of applause for coming in. So the reason why I decided to introduce this panel today is because far too often we focus on the politics of it and the statistics and the numbers. Not enough do we focus on the human stories of what's behind those statistics and how people are affected. I just told you about the story of Connie. These are real life stories in your district, in Winmore's district, who are affected by our current healthcare system. I got a chance to talk with Connie over the phone, and she told me her story about being a small business owner and how it has affected her. And for me, it wasn't shocking, but it's also one of those things that was shocking the average American who is not affected. Alicia told me her story, her difficulties with healthcare. And it's one of those things that it shouldn't be a situation, but it is because we have a broken up healthcare system that doesn't even make sense. And a lot of our speakers today talked about the inefficiencies of our healthcare system. So I'll just kind of quickly introduce our panel. So Connie is a 40-year-old. You want me to say your age? Okay. Connie Calderon is a 48-year-old woman, former small business owner. Business was a daily living skills provider in community settings, providing state-certified training, and currently outside a full-time job with Milwaukee Terms. Certified Zumba instructor, providing Zumba community-based program. Also, she has 2 adult children, 26 and 19, is a peer support program coordinator with the Milwaukee Terms full-time. So give a round of applause to Madison is Assembly Rep of District 10, self-explanatory. And then we have Alicia, member of Youth United Electors. So thank you all for being here. So I'm just going to get right into the questions. So one of the questions I wanted to start with is, and I'll start with you, because I think your story is good. What has your experience been like with private health insurance as of now? You don't have to pick it.
Oh, okay, well, I don't have, I have insurance through my job, so my husband and I, this is our only child, Rain. I've been on my job for 16 years. We added up, me and my husband paid $872 a month for our health care. For just me and our child. That's over $10,000 a month, I mean a year. What did that go to? My union field organizer, Sean, asked me one day after a meeting that we were having and said, asked me, what would I do if I didn't have to pay insurance? Without even thinking, I said, I would be a stay-at-home mom. It's a shame that it costs that much to live. I'm diabetic, I have high blood pressure. I got, they kicked me out of Walgreens because they said my medication was too high and sent me to CVS. My medicine is about $130 a month. And it's so much that money could go towards if we didn't have to pay insurance.
Wow. I mean, that's just mind-blowing, that how much you're spending a month just on like, and that's even, you're not even going, that's not even part of your copays, right? That's just your premium. Jesus Christ. See, even me, I'm shocked, and I didn't even know that part, but yeah, that's ridiculous. That's ton of money. You're now assembly rep, so you're covered in the state, right?
Yeah, luckily now.
Yeah. So what was your experience like before that? How did you kind of get through with your health insurance plans?
Yeah, so for a while I didn't have insurance. I'm 26 years old now. A lot of my time after I transitioned out of high school, I spent without insurance. I just didn't go to the hospital, right? If I needed something, it was like you figure it out at home, you buy whatever over-the-counter medicine you can to navigate it, and so on. And there was a few different times in my life where I could have really used insurance. There was a moment in 2018 where, because of the cost, one, working at a nonprofit and trying to navigate the cost of living, I was working 4 jobs, right? And that, doing all of that and overworking myself led to a point in my time where I found myself in DC. I somehow always end up back there twice a year. But I was at a convening talking about the importance of investing in young people who are transitioning into adulthood. And at some point, all of the stress hit me at once, and I went through psychosis. I got lost in DC, and eventually found myself, got to the airport somehow, but I thought I was dead. And eventually, I somehow got home. I remember calling my boss at the time and being like, I'm scared and I need help, and she helped me navigate that. And when I got home, I was like, our organization was trying to figure out what we can do for health insurance for staff, and things were close to being solidified, but not yet. And I was like, I need help. I'm scared. I need a psychologist. And I actually ended up getting therapy for free because I got connected to somebody in my, just through relationships I built with folks. But without that, there's so many things that could have happened to me. I could have harmed someone, right? I could have ended up incarcerated. I could have harmed someone or harmed myself, ended up dead, or worse. And luckily that didn't happen because I had a system of support around me. But think about the amount of folks in our country that don't have systems of support, right? That are left to deal with, so many mental health issues, so many other forms of healthcare issues, without health insurance. And think about where a lot of those folks are, right? Institutionalized, incarcerated, homeless, right? These are the structural inequities that end up perpetuating, right? Because we're not willing to do what's necessary for all people in our state and in our country. There's so many stories I can give you related to, my own experience without healthcare, but I think that one alone highlights the importance of what Medicare for All is, right? Not only for everyday residents, but for the folks who are dealing with the deepest disparities in our country.
I mean, that's another one of those stories that shouldn't be a thing, but it is. And how many people we have to ask go through those issues and don't have a backup plan, don't have a support system, and again, you were out of state, right?
Yeah.
We have in-network, out-network system. What if you have to go to an out-network hospital? How much are you going to be paying for that? Because if you don't have the money to pay out-network, you're screwed. And that's just something that just doesn't make sense. So thank you for sharing that, Darren. Connie, we had a good talk. And I was really compelled by your story because you're coming from the perspective of a small business owner. Can you tell me about kind of what we talked about, your experience with private health insurance as a small business owner?
Okay. You talked about
Yeah, I know, right?
You're a great speaker.
Yeah,
So I had started my own business back in 2007, in which I dissolved last June. I had to have private insurance, obviously, in order to have health insurance. Due to the cost, typically throughout those years, my health insurance, if I had it, because in the beginning I chose not to take it, just because I couldn't afford it. I was a single mom, my kids were, luckily my youngest was carried by her father's insurance. My oldest was until she was 18, because he kindly did that, he didn't have to. But I would not have been able to afford. I did social services for my business, so it wasn't like this plentiful job, making profit. And I ended up paying, I think, anywhere from 400, top 500, depending on, and the program was, and it took a lot of time, money. The reason I ended up dissolving it is I kept getting older and the work kept getting harder, and I could not afford to hire people to help me and pay them a living wage, as well as offer them insurance. The wage to pay them for them to qualify for benefits through the state was not a sustainable life living wage. So who would come work for me? Not people, you know, that I would want to have under my supervision. So I couldn't grow it, and I had a stroke in 2020. Unexpectedly, I was pretty healthy at that point, but I did. And because we're a reactive society, I think is a huge part of it. I didn't have the health care before that, or you didn't want to go to the doctor because it costs this much money. I felt I was healthy. Mental health care you didn't touch because you could maybe go for 6 times, and then after that it was $200 a piece if you needed to go, even if it was not for something major. After my stroke, up until currently, because even though I work full-time for an employer, it's a nonprofit employer, very, very small. I am fortunate enough to have a small portion of my private insurance reimbursed, but it's just that. And then it's the other things. If you've ever had a severe mental or physical illness happen, it comes with other mental health things after that. So I often don't go to the doctor because those visits may end up needing a CAT scan. They might end up needing an EKG, all in which one visit to satisfy or calm my panic disorder that I now have could cost me $6,000, you know, just for walking in the door with my private insurance. I also teach Zumba. I also am a caregiver every other week, so I have to have these other jobs, which I love, and I don't know that I would stop doing regardless, but they do make a huge difference in my bills.
I mean, one of the things that I think that you highlighted was the sacrifices of the small business. You can't grow because you got this super cost. And the question would be, and we kind of know the answer, how can small businesses thrive under a Medicare law system? And obviously, you know, to answer that, I'm just saying, like, hypothetical, that's what's stopping us from growing as a society. A lot of these elected officials say we're doing X, Y, and Z for small businesses, but if you really wanted to support small businesses, you would take the healthcare burden off the backs. Because right now, it's on the backs, and it's stopping them from growing, and as a result, people are going more into corporate jobs, more into corporate monopoly jobs, and it's crushing small business. So that's a sacrifice that it's creating in our society. That's why when you go out, you're seeing less and less small businesses, less and less black-owned businesses. I mean, it's hard. So thank you for sharing that, Connie. So one of the follow-up questions I want to ask, Alicia, you kind of already hinted at this, that because of the healthcare costs and payments, you aren't able to be a stay-at-home counselor. So if you don't mind me asking this, how does this affect like your relationship with your daughter? Obviously, you would like to be more involved in this.
Well, being a working parent, I have my house, I have insurance. I work in the morning from 8 to 4:30, and by the time she come home, it's a little, maybe a couple hours to be with her. It's time to go to bed, her to go to bed. So, opposed to me staying at home with her all day, you know, but she's learning that daycare, I could do that at home, it's just daycare. It's nothing like spending quality time with your child as opposed to somebody else raising her, basically. If you're at work 8 hours a day and she has to sleep 8 hours a day, what does that leave us, you know, so, yeah.
Yeah, and I can attest to that. I mean, when I was younger, but when I was a lot younger, my dad worked, healthcare was a lot cheaper at that time. My dad basically worked full-time, my mom worked part-time, but she was able to be home with us a lot.
Yeah.
And actually get to raise us and spend time with us. I can't imagine if she had to work full-time, just like nonstop, we would have never seen her. And I feel like that would affect my brothers.
Yeah.
So yeah, thanks for sharing that. Darren, for you, I guess it's the reverse question. How has, having that healthcare behind you affected you in a positive way?
Oh, dude, let me tell you. And the thing is, I'm sad because folks don't have the opportunity to have the quality of healthcare that I have, and that other legislators do have, and should. But I've been able to do so much since, since I've gotten healthcare, now as a representative. I have appointment with my optometrist to talk about, I have amblyopia, which is lazy eye. I was told a few years ago that, long term is something that isn't done about my lazy eye because the muscle is getting weaker and weaker. There's a potential chance that my eye could fall out, right? There's something that can be done about that, and I'm exploring it. There's so much things about my family's health that I've been able to begin looking at. I lost my grandmother, my aunt, my uncle, and my grandfather on my mother's side, all to breast cancer. Right? When you have that large of a percentage of folks that are directly close to you, dying of breast cancer, that means that there's the likeliness of you having it increases substantially as well. Those are things that I can now, deal with right. I can help navigate earlier, right? Without having to wait until it appears in my life, so that I can employ preventative measures. I can also think about how, I can also plan for my future, and for with the grand scope of benefits that I have access to as a legislator. As a legislator, I can plan for a future for my children one day, right, where I can help prevent things, I can be there for them instead of dealing with so many things that could harm me beforehand early in life. So I don't know if I fully gave you the answer that was that made sense, but there's so much preventative work that I can do as a 26-year-old now that a lot of folks don't have access to, so that I don't have to deal with the chaos of so many health conditions that are known, especially in Black communities, later. So
yeah, for sure. And Connie, and this is an opinion-based question. How do you think Medicare for all will benefit small businesses?
I definitely think it would increase the ability to grow. Obviously, if you were able to offer, or it would be offered, they wouldn't have to go through getting private insurance or taking a small wage, especially when you do contract work, you obviously get paid fee for service. So you have to do the work in order to get paid. You have to you have to do some type of service. And so they pay you, especially the state, when you're contracted with the state like I was, you get paid this base rate, and this is what it is. And so then you have to take out taxes, you have to take out, if you're going to pay somebody else to do the work. By the time all of that is taken out, it leaves with a very small wage. So you could pay people sustainable wages where they can do the jobs, and you would get the people that are, actually have that as a passion to do the job, and not just someone taking anything. So it would create a lot of opportunity for growth.
So this is something, obviously one of the reasons why we're here is to highlight that. The other reason why we're here is to ask Representative Glenmore to publicly co-sponsor Medicare. At this point, she does not. If you had the chance to speak with her today, what would you say? And this is for all. Kind of take this. And I think you kind of already said something to her by telling your stories. But what would you say to her if you had the opportunity to talk to her and ask her about her support for Medicare for all, given the stories that you shared?
I personally would ask her to take a look at just the entire community as a whole, but also in the Black and brown communities, there is a lot of young people that are entrepreneurs, like a huge amount, and they have great ideas, and there's a lot of young people also going around that don't have health insurance because they want to follow their dreams, which we, as my generation, have encouraged them strongly to do. Like, that's what you can do, whatever you want, and it's great, you know, I think it's a wonderful thing. However, it's gonna be more and more difficult as they get older, and things keep happening to prevent them from having to deal with my generation and older, who are now like starting to have all these aches and pains and things, you know, health crises, to look at that and see how that could benefit all of those people, even people not in the Black and brown community that are entrepreneurs and wanting to create small business, taking away from big corporation or corporate funding. You know, people who make the CAT scan machine and how much money they're making off of that, you know, 5-minute scan.
Oh, I can go next. Yeah, so, you know, I've had conversations with the Congresswoman, but, you know, I always think about the social determinants of health. Gwen talks about the social determinants of health all the time, especially as she's been talking about the importance of childcare, you know, in some of the national fights she's been navigating. But as we think about providing healthcare, if we provide healthcare for all folks, regardless of economic status, we increase the quality of life that folks have. We increase the potential of a future generation. If we are providing with young people what all communities need in the form of healthcare, from mental health services to nutrition services to, you know, pre-screenings for a lot of conditions, to just having the ability to go have a physical, without having to deal with you know, the potential exuberant cost of simply walking through the door of a hospital. We open up a door of opportunity for folks to be able to thrive in areas of their life that we may have never fathomed. We open the opportunity for our state to begin to address issues that communities are facing, right? Beyond generally healthcare, and some of them contribute to healthcare issues like housing, like affordability of food in folks' homes, like access to clean energy. You know, when we do that, right, we can tackle some of those other issues that improve the quality of life for all of us, especially. You know, as we think about a city like Milwaukee, which has some of the starkest disparities as it relates to communities of color in the nation. We can do better. We should do better, especially in a society that preaches socialism for the rich and you know, stark individualism for the poor. So that's my message. It's the message that I push with my colleagues on the assembly floor. in every space that I occupy. So I give that to her too.
Alicia, is there anything you would like to say?
Well, I'm pretty straightforward. I probably just ask what the hell is she thinking.
Are we all? I want you to give our panel a round of applause. These are real stories, and these stories aren't unique. There are 100 Connies out there. There are 100 Darrens out there. There's 100 Alicias out there that are going through similar issues, and it's time for it to change. And it's time for women more to listen to these stories, because until she does, we're going to continue to have disparities. We're going to continue to have inequality. Until we convert to Medicare for all, this situation will not end. So thank you for coming up to the panel.
Can I just ask you a quick question?
Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, I know as like an officer in your union, you were on the bargaining team.
Yes.
And negotiated your last contract. I mean, there's $800 that you pay, your family pays per month.
Yes.
There's also $1,300 a month that the employer pays towards your health. I mean, small businesses are disproportionately impacted. This is a national corporation that makes lead acid batteries here in Milwaukee, based out of Atlanta, Georgia, and they still are paying over $2,000 a month combined. If we were able to get Medicare for all, our union is endorsed that, by the way, how would that change? It's a no-brainer, right? Because our members are impacted. Right? A lot of people say, you know, unions, you know, what about the union workers that have the Cadillac plans? But even the folks with the quote-unquote Cadillac plans, the hardest thing to negotiate over is family health care. And it's because we have one child on that plan, it's 6 times more expensive. Not because children use more health care, they're healthy, right? You use more health care at the end of your life than you do at that age. It's because of price gouging all of us. But what would that have meant for you in bargaining, for our local, if we had $1,300 that could have gone back on the table that wasn't going home?
That money could have went towards our wages. You know, better living, everything went up. That would have helped out tremendously if we didn't have to pay health insurance. There's so much we can do with that money. That's $100 less. We pay $100 a month less than what our mortgage is for insurance. If we get sick, I have to sometimes wait at home just so I can go to urgent care instead of going to the emergency room. It's $250 just by walking in the door. And before the doctor even come in and ask, how are you gonna pay this $250?
Yeah.
It's sad. Or I have to pray that I could just go get her some Benadryl from Walgreens instead of having to take her, and it's not nothing more serious. You know, it's sad. We could come so much further and go so much further and do so much more for our families if we didn't have to pay for insurance.
$1,300 that could have gone towards your retirement plan, that could have gone towards vacation, so you would have more time with rain. I mean, it's an insane system that is broken and has to go. Thank you, guys.
So not only is this system, the healthcare system, you know, as you mentioned before, it's not broken, it's intended, you know, it's working as intended. But not only is the system inequitable, but as Senator Larson said before, the backdrop to all this, to show how endemic this is through the whole system, not just healthcare, but just society at large, this is against a major tax cut that's just been signed off in the state budget. That is going to translate into an $85,000 average cut for people making more than $300,000. So I should ask the panelists, what can you use with $85,000 towards your health care? Even a really, you know, crummy plan, $85,000 would get you at least 5 or 6 years of affordable health care for one family.
I can tell you with OWR's budget, we could use a lot with 85.
85,000 to 85,000.
I mean,
as you're talking about some of the issues that we've been dealing with at the state level, right? That we say that we shouldn't be subsidizing, right? Again, like childcare, which got taken out of the budget, and is one of the, childcare counts, the childcare counts program, which was, funded through ARPA funds, but we were trying to codify it in the budget, understanding that without it, 25% of childcare providers would have to close, right? And that the cost of childcare would go up. And we know, right?
Oh, yeah.
You know what the cost of childcare is, right? Which is why a portion of the reason why you would choose to be a stay-at-home mother,
Yeah,
right?
that's $150 a week we pay for childcare for her.
Precisely.
Thank God she started school this year.
Precisely. So if you're talking about $85,000 in a tax cut, again, for the rich, right? Instead of providing childcare, instead of actually, ensuring we have funds for public education, instead of ensuring that we have access to, again, healthcare, when we're dealing with, and then housing, which feeds into some of these issues that folks are dealing with in terms of their health, we are failing. We are failing when we make these decisions to subsidize, again, the rich at the expense of working class citizens, right? It's time that we put working class citizens first, right? Because we know that when we raise the standard of living of the working class, everything else goes up. So I got nothing else to say. Kind of come through with some more heat.
I'm good. Ditto. Yeah, I just want to make a point too. I am retired, but my husband will not retire. We're almost 70. Due to the fact of health insurance, because of what Congress is starting to do. So now we're in danger of losing Medicare. We wouldn't have the situation with Medicaid if we had Medicare for all. There wouldn't be any testing on for people who are trying to get this. So I mean, we're going to be in a real crisis now that people like me, my husband's a nice union job. Well, he's not going to quit. Well, that means that someone else younger cannot come in because he's going to stay. So there's a workforce opportunity that's not there too. So I mean, it would solve a lot of issues. Is basically what I say. And like I said, you're going to start seeing elderly people having really difficulties now.
You guys are good. Tim, I don't know where he went. He's up next. But
Thank you.
we're going to next talk about kind of Medicare for all from a physician standpoint. I'm going to sit down with my leg hurts. Yes, you should.
Bye-bye.
I need to get checked out. But a few things while we're waiting. So there's two things as far as action items that I want us all to do. So you should have all gotten the QR code. I want you to scan that QR code. And what that is it's a petition to ask Representative Whitmore to support Medicare for all. Right now we're at 269 signees for the petition. Not only do I want you to sign it, but I also want you to share it with your friends and family. The more people who sign it, the more likely it is that we get some support traction behind it. The second thing I want you to do, and I know all of you are really engaged people, is get involved. Whether it's with All Wisconsin Revolution, Citizen Action, Voces de la Frontera, Wisconsin Poor People's Campaign, PNHP, get involved because it's going to take a movement of a lot of organizations to really push this movement. So those are the two major things that I want everybody to do here when you leave this forum. And Tim, can you please come up?
At least no one will disagree with me up here.
So I'm really glad that you're here, Tim, because a lot of times when we're talking about Medicare for all, we don't really get a chance to hear the perspective of a physician. And when we do, it's very far and few between. So I guess the first question for you is, why do you think there aren't more physicians coming out in favor of Medicare for all, considering what the benefits are?
I'm reminded of a question William McKinley, who was running for president in the year 1900. Somebody asked one of his campaign managers something, and the answer that the campaign manager said, there's two things you have to realize about politics. Number one, it's all about money. And I can't remember what the second one was.
It's all about money.
That's the short answer. I think physicians, even ones that are for Medicare for all, kind of want to, I mean, when you go interview for a job, I'm talking about the nuts and bolts of being a doctor, you want to know kind of what your working conditions are going to be, how many hours you're going to work, and what's your salary. Because you have, fortunately, you have, unlike some people who I feel sorry for, you have a lot of choices. You can go places and negotiate a pretty good salary. You can be like Taylor Swift. You got choices, whereas people without means don't have choices. So you look at that, I think they're kind of afraid for maybe selfish personal reasons, but I think everyone wants to know, what am I going to get paid? I want to know if I can pay my bill. It's just a normal reaction. But the other part is you also have overhead. You have to pay employees. You have to pay malpractice insurance. You have to buy an ear, nose, and throat chair, which is $10,000, and a little laryngeal mirror, probably $300. All these prices also are jacked up a lot because they know that patients don't have a lot of power. The physician can charge whatever they want. And so that's on, I mean, they don't think of that. They think of, that laryngeal mirror is $300, and how am I going to pay that? After they're in practice a while, it kind of settles down. It's like when you buy a new home, you can't sleep for the first couple of nights, well, how am I going to meet this mortgage? After a year or two goes by, hopefully you kind of go, oh, yeah, I'm going to make it. So it's some of that. Other thing, a family practitioner in Fond du Lac told me, a good friend of mine that I went to medical school with, said that him and his father was in practice before he was in World War II as a medic. He said, we had to quit giving vaccines because, we weren't getting paid. We lost money. We had to buy the vaccines, and whenever we gave it out, we were losing a lot of money just giving vaccination. Again, what kind of healthcare system is that? You have a medical practice, but you can't give vaccines. So it's part of that. I think one thing that would help would be if they get down in the weeds. I know Harry Reid, the senator or congressman from Nevada, I think helped negotiate with Obamacare, and he offered the AMA like a 3% increase for primary care, and that kind of tipped the primary care doctors to support the AMA, to support it. So that's kind of, they're also afraid of losing a little bit of control. They don't know if they're going to control costs for, they don't know if they're going to say, well, you can't get an MRI, or there's going to be a lot of extra regulations. But I was in the Army, and I can tell you, dealing with my pay in the Army and my practice in the Army, it was very fair, it was very fun. It was socialized medicine. The U.S. Army is the largest healthcare organization in the world, by the way. I never had the same problems as I did going into private practice, dealing with administration. In fact, administration in private practice are doctors who don't like being doctors. They went into administration. They get paid 3 times more. And there was a clip out in 1991, right after Desert Storm. W.H. Bush was running for office and lost to Bill Clinton, but this little USA Snapshot showed that Appleton, Wisconsin had the lowest health care costs in the United States. There was absolutely no HMOs in Appleton, Wisconsin. Years later, now it's one of the highest rising healthcare costs here because of extra administration or private administration of the HMO. There's a lot of factors in that, but I'll go on and then see. Okay, so that's that answer for that.
So, another question I have for you, and this is you kind of learning through other doctors I've spoken with and kind of in my research is the amount of paperwork you guys have. So, can you tell me about your experience with dealing with paperwork compared to a private insurance compared to like working with Medicare? How does that affect your work life? How do you deal with that?
I had a sign in my office, being the cynic that I am. Patients used to laugh at it, they understood what I was saying. The sign said, I could get a lot of computer work, we don't have paperwork anymore, we have computers. I could get a lot of computer work done around here if I didn't have all these patients to take care of. Okay, bringing in the computer, I had to cut my clinic volume in half. It just took so much more. When your doctor's sitting there typing the note, they're not typing your medical history. They are partly. They're doing is typing your bill, quite frankly. All these systems that Meditech and Epic, they're billing things that are hooked to insurance companies. But yeah, in the Army, the paperwork was nil. We wrote our notes. Patients got the same health care. Sorry, electronic medical record. There are some benefits to it. I didn't see it so much in surgery. Medicare is less. The amount of staff you need to, you don't have to call Medicare and get pre-approval or whatever. You just basically send them the bill and they pay you or pay the institution. Private insurance, I was here at Dean my last, and it was a good system. A lot of good nurses, a lot of good doctors, and just like UW and the Jackson Clinic and previous systems. But I'm losing my thought now. But the amount of paperwork. So I mainly had like Dean Health Plan patients, or Medicaid or Medicare, or no pay patients. I really saw people that didn't have insurance, but the amount of paperwork is a whole lot less than Medicare. When I did get a private insurance, often they would deny surgery. Like you had a child with 4+ tonsils, and the mother would say they're snoring and stopping breathing at night. I said, well, you look in there, the tonsils are kissing, touching. I said, they need their tonsils out. Well, if it's a private insurance company, I'm not going to know anything, but they would come back and say, well, you can't do a tonsillectomy unless you get a sleep study. So a sleep study is between $8,000 and $16,000, and you already know they need their tonsils out. And if you don't get it, they deny it. So when you get it, it says they have obstructive sleep apnea. Duh, you knew that already. And then they'll deny the claim for the sleep study they suggested, or go after the patient and say you owe the money for the sleep study because they can't afford it. So yeah, I think you could have a Medicare for All system, and in the nuts and bolts of it, the administration, they could muck it up, and they could make the paperwork worse. I think trying to take care of inequity in healthcare, the government tries its best to come up with all sorts of systems that are kind of band-aids, patch systems. The good intent, but sometimes the paperwork increases too. You get a developmentally disabled child in special needs in school. I think the teachers note that they have to fill out the paperwork, and they're glad to do it. But I think if you just start from the top, and so that everyone's covered right away, you wouldn't have to deal with equity. You already proclaimed equity already.
So one of the things you just said is that, they're just kind of clean billing notes. So, and maybe some of you can attest to this too. When I go to the doctor, sometimes I'll ask for something specific, and he'll mostly be on the computer doing a few things, and then he'll be like, "Oh, just take some ibuprofen." I'm like, "Well, I could have done that at home."
Yeah.
So, do you think because of our antiquated healthcare system, physicians pay less time on care for their patients than they do because of that system?
Yeah,
because I feel like I would get more care, because sometimes he's just so busy and he's like worried about the next thing he has to do. I'm like, well, I could have subscribed ice to my needs by myself.
Yeah, they have less time to sit and talk. I'll tell you a story. My Uncle Joe was shot down bombing Hanover, Germany in World War II, and not for war. In fact, my brother was killed in Vietnam, and his hoochmate came back and said, your brother was a great guy, he was a pilot, and if he was lucky enough to make it to Vietnam like I did, he would have been the Vietnam, the president of the Vietnam Veterans Against the War. And so I went in to kind of follow my brother's footsteps and do another. But your question again, I get lost in these emotional things. What's your question again?
The question is, does the antiquated system or broken up system lead to less care for the patient?
Yeah. So my Uncle Joe was shot down over Hanover. He was shot in the arm 6 times. Only 2 out of the 10 boys made it back, and he was lying. He was a POW for a year, and this old Czechoslovakian doctor would come in every day, and you could see the bone there. He would dress the wound, take an old German newspaper, clean it, and put some clean linen and make a splint on it. The old Czechoslovakian doctor came through and patted him on the head every day. He was an 18-year-old Sergeant E6 waist gunner, and he'd pat him on the head and say, "I would love to take care of you better if I only had the tools." The doctor was very frustrated, but he had volunteered to serve in this Nazi POW camp. 60 years later, he goes to a hospital in Rockford. He's jaundiced, he has pancreatic cancer, and my aunt tells me that, you know, they didn't really seem to care too much for Joe. Their only idea was to get him out of the hospital as quickly as possible. If you get a new doctor every day, who would come in and their back turned to him, ask him a question, they wouldn't even examine him. They knew he was probably not going to survive very long, but they were anxious to get him up. So they never examined him or laid their hands on him. And my aunt, ran into her primary care doctor, who doesn't come to the hospital anymore, and say, "Hey, Dr. Smith, Joe's in the hospital." And he goes, "Oh yeah, how's he doing? I've been reading about him on the computer." You know, no coming to the bedside. So how ironic it is that the poor Czechoslovakian doctor who offered his services in the POW camp and would clean the wound, lay his hands on it, and express frustration that he didn't have the tools, when in fact he did have the tools. He gave that 18-year-old boy a lot of hope. And he made it home, and he married my aunt, and he had 6 kids. Lived happily after. He could play golf still, even though he had a paralyzed arm. So that's kind of like, we're sitting there typing on our computer, and we've created a disconnect. The physical diagnosis skills of an American doctor are very poor compared to English doctors. They don't listen to your heart. They order echocardiogram for $3,000 or whatever. You know.
So, I mean, one of the complaints that I hear, not necessarily from doctors, but politicians, is that if we transfer to a Medicare for all system, our doctors wouldn't get paid as much, and they'll leave the practice, and we would have increased wait times, et cetera, et cetera. But when I look at Canada, they have a single payer healthcare system. Doctors aren't fleeing the industry. They seem to be paid pretty good. I mean, what would you say to that type of like fear mongering about Medicare for all?
That's exactly what it is. I mean, they be paid double. If you went to a doctor and said, for a gallbladder operation, we won't give you $2,000, we'll give you $4,000, you'd have Medicare for all. The medical societies are not as powerful as they used to be, but the AMA has always been against any type of social. 1930s, you're going to become Nazis. 1950s, you're going to become communists. They use all of that fear mongering. But you're right. You don't see a huge influx of Canadian physicians here. They get paid fairly, and they like their practice. They're not dealing with people that are struggling and are begging for health care. Because they realize those people sitting in their office fix their roofs, fix their furnaces. When their toilet's broken, they come in and do the plumbing on it. When they need an electrician, they come in and they have skills that the doctor doesn't have. They respect their fellow citizens.
I mean, that's, do any of you have questions for Tim Shaw? Because I think this is kind of like a rare opportunity to have a physician come talk on that.
Yes.
I was curious, so, practices and the current systems that we're in, there's a lot of like paperwork in the back end, and because of this, I know, oftentimes just like medical lawyers and, current physicians is hired on, as far as like administrative staff.
administration, if you look at physician administrators, you know, beginning in about the 1980s, they're up here now. And you look, there's much more. Medicare, I think, is administered, you see, either 3% or 5% overhead for administrative costs, whereas insurance companies, private insurance companies, and the amount of staff you need to staff them is more like 18%, 20%. There's more billing clerks at Johns Hopkins University Hospital than there are nurses. In Seattle, there's 230 different insurance companies. There's a new thing on Medicare Advantage, which is private insurance selling Medicare. It's kind of like school vouchers. The public payer is paying for Medicare. In the Dane County, there's 23 different Medicare Advantage plans. They don't even have to be doctors groups. They could be some private equity corporation that hires one doctor to say he's our doctor, and they can just run an insurance company like that in private equity. And they're buying up ERs and obstetric practice, well, not obstetric, orthopedic practices, eye practices. So Dane County has 23. The state of Wisconsin has 230 different Medicare Advantage plans, and they're going up and up and up because there's a great way to make a whole lot of money through private equity. And they know nothing about healthcare. They'll buy a nursing home and run it into the ground, have all sorts of complications, and they're legally exempt from being held accountable for what goes on in the emergency room because they buy the corporation, make the corporation pay them to own them, run them into the ground, sell them off for a profit, and they're legally exempt for any malpractice that is caused because of, there's a whole book out called Plunder. It's worth a read. It's not just in healthcare, it's in things you mentioned too, banking, education, those type of things. I don't know if I'm really answering these questions or I'm just jamming.
No, you're going in. You're going up. Spin fire. So I mean, those are actually all the questions I had. I think you really kind of did an insight of what kind of the inside knowledge of it. But if there's something more you want to share, feel free to do that.
Well, I'll just say a couple other things. Angela, is that your name? Alicia.
Sure.
Great apology. Okay. I love hearing you talk. When you talk about stay-at-home mom, I'm sure some congressperson would say, oh no, she doesn't want to work or something like that. Actually, someone did a study that people who don't bring home a W-2 form, like stay-at-home moms or dads, mainly mothers, actually looked at the amount of work that a mother does if they got paid somehow. They actually would generate like $5 trillion more than the people who bring home a W-2 form.
Come on.
And so that's what yes, sir.
My question was essentially going to be what you just touched on, particularly with childcare just having been removed from the state budget, how so many of these issues are intertwined. We hear a lot of our elected officials talking about, as you mentioned, nobody wants to work. The labor shortage in the state, despite the fact that Wisconsin's unemployment rate right now is one of the lowest that it's ever been at. You can use private insurance as a means to force someone to stay in a dead-end job, stay in the office. They don't have other opportunities. Childcare is so expensive that they can't afford to stay home. Childcare might even be more expensive. For example, Alicia, I don't know your situation, but hypothetically, let's say an individual is paying $2,000 a month in childcare and their income is only $1,700. It makes significantly more sense to stay at home. But they are forcing you into whatever dead-end job they need occupied, essentially a cog in the machine, by not offering any insurance alternatives. So you are losing money on childcare, but you are getting the protection of insurance. It appears to just be a number of industries working in cahoots. That this is all just designed to screw over the working class.
Make the most money for the people at the top. Yeah, you're kind of chained to your oar, like the movie Ben-Hur rowing is chained to the oar. I occasionally go to McDonald's after the dog park, and I won't say what town, it's near Madison. Just gets out, and it may affect the employee. But anyway, when I go, mainly Spanish-speaking people are running the store, really nice. But every day I see these little kids there stuck, for an 8-hour shift in a booth in front of a little iPad or something, and I'm going, what the heck kind of life is that? They obviously they don't get paid enough. Their insurance is probably crappy. They have insurance, but it probably doesn't pay anything. If they get sick, they'll get dropped. But this poor little kid sits there on this iPad. It just breaks my heart. It just breaks my heart.
Especially when a lot of older generations will criticize young parents for sticking the child in front of an iPad or a television. You're not raising your child, you're letting technology do it. Well, no, I'm working the dead-end job that you're mandating I do through structural inequality. What are my other options? It doesn't exist.
I'll tell you one story. I had an LPN friend in Madison at the hospital. I won't say the hospital. Anyway, she slipped and fell on. She was running to help a patient. There was a patient screaming. She ran down the hall, slipped and fell, and had a compound fracture of her right and left lower leg. The bone was sticking out. And so the hospital, she wanted to get workman's comp, and the hospital said it's workman's comp. The insurance company for the workman's comp said we're not paying for it because she broke the rules. Apparently there was one of these cones there on the side, but what was she to do? It was a patient in distress. The floor had been mopped like 6 hours earlier, and someone had just left the cone. And the floor, and she didn't even slip on that. But anyway, neither one. She had 2 teenage daughters. She had to declare bankruptcy. She went broke and lost her job and the whole thing. And I go, what kind of society is that? You asked about patients delaying care. I got called to a hospital once a day after Thanksgiving in Appleton. A little kid had swallowed a coin and came to the emergency room, and the ENT doctor said, admit him up to the ward, or admit him right to surgery, I'll come in. When the surgeon came in, he came in and said, oh, I don't take their insurance. The kid was covered under Medicaid. And so told the parents, if it came in through, if he had seen him in the ER, he would have to by law. But since they're in the OR legally, I mean, it's illegal. He says, okay, I don't have to come, I'm not going to care for you now. I'll care for you, but you'll have to pay. Told the parents, and they would wind up paying $8,000 or something. So I didn't even have privileges at this hospital. The nurse in the OR, who I knew, because I called her at night for car accidents and stuff. She called me and said, would you come over? Because I took anybody that walked in the door. Come over. So I went over in about 5 seconds, took the coin out, and I felt really jarred to the parents. Felt really good doing that, and the parents were happy with things, But I kind of go, again, what kind of society is this that, do they delay care? Well, the physicians are even delaying care in this case. Gwen Moore, you didn't ask me that question. So if I got to speak to Gwen Moore, I would say, okay, there'd be 2 things. The first thing would be, okay, someone develops a dental abscess, no dentist will see him because he has Medicaid. The thing goes into the neck, and then it gets worse and goes into the chest. And the week prior, he lost his health insurance and dental insurance. He was a union plumber, I believe, or a welder, and he lost his insurance. And so then I'll say he's uninsured. He wasn't covered by Medicaid, but no dentist would see him because there was no insurance. So then he got sicker and sicker. So I took care of him in the emergency room. And he wound up being intubated, a tracheostomy. He was in the ICU for 2 months, and then developed renal failure. He was on kidney dialysis. He came out of the hospital barely alive with 2 kids and a wife, and previously healthy, and had insurance until a week prior. So now I'd ask Gwen Moore, I say, okay, if he was at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, he would have just walked down a dental sick call, smoke bomb dental clinic, and a dental officer would have the honor of taking out his tooth, no problem. He wouldn't have to pay anything. But here, he's got a $2 million bill, no job, no kidneys, he's on dialysis. So who pays for that? Well, the hospital administrators wind up charging other paying patients more for the care of him, his $2 million bill. So I'd ask Gwen, I'd say, Gwen, what do you want to do? Pay no money or $25 for a dental extraction, which anybody can do, I can do. or $2 million. You know, it's coming out of your budget. What do you want, $25 or $2 million? The other one I'd say to her is when Canada finally got its Medicare for all, the person that pushed it in Saskatchewan, he was a Scottish kid who grew up and he was poor, and he got operated on by a surgeon and did it for free, and he always thought everyone should have health care. But Tommy Douglas, and he started Medicare for all essentially in Saskatchewan. It was the biggest opponent of that in Canada was our own AMA. There wasn't
Yeah, they
Canadians.
sued.
Yeah, so eventually everyone liked it. It spread throughout all of Canada. And just several years ago, Tommy Douglas was voted the most beloved, the greatest Canadian of all time. The greatest Canadian in this country. I say, Gwen, you can be the greatest American of all time. And there were some really good ones too. There's a few bad. Most of us are okay, but there was great. Gwen, you can be the greatest American. Just get with the program.
So, I want to give you all a third test. I want you to write down this number. So, I think everybody has phones. So you can write this down on your phone right now. 414-297-1140. That's the number to Gwen Moore's Milwaukee office. I want you all to call her office and ask her to support Medicare for all.
One more time.
414-297-1140. That is Gwen Moore's Milwaukee office. I want you all to call her office and ask her to support Medicare for all. Real quick, write it down. She probably won't talk to you personally, but the staff will hear your voice. And that's how we can advocate. And we're going to continue to have this movement. Everybody give Tim Shaw a round of applause.
Andrea, I'll put in a letter and send it to Gwen.
Yeah. And also give yourselves a round of applause.
Ask her what she's
on
not.
Saturday. That does conclude our Medicare for All forum. I want you all, thank you all for coming here today on a Saturday. I know you could be doing anything else, but you're here to kind of advocate and be here and hear some people. So.